Hello, welcome to the Raised Beaches podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Evan James Gowan, but you can call me Evan. I'm recording this on June 30th, 2025. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast, you'll note that there's been a bit of a gap since the last episode, which I recorded last March. And that's in part because I've been very busy teaching. So I'm teaching 4 courses at a local university here in Kumamoto. And as a result of teaching 4 classes for the first time, I've been very busy trying to put together all of the material for the course. And that is quite time consuming, and I have to travel back and forth. And teaching is quite fun, but the best part is I get to choose what to teach. So there's one course that is for environmental resources students. So I've been teaching them about climate change. So I've had some focus on how climate change is affecting Japan. So it's been quite a bit of fun for me to go through and find out about these topics and let the students know that if they want to do academic research, they're probably going to have to learn some English, because these are English classes at first and foremost. But I think it's enjoyable for the students that there is a science angle to their English course. And for today's episode, the deep dive is going to be on carbon dioxide, and it's not going to be focused on the relationship of carbon dioxide and global warming, but rather just to show what we know about changes in carbon dioxide over time. This is a paleoclimate focus podcast after all. And in the papers section, I'm only going to show one paper, which will be focused on a study that I published back in earlier this year. So I'm excited to share the results of that with all of you. Of course, if you look at my face, it might, if you're watching the video version, it looks a bit red, and that's because today it's like 37 degrees in Kumamoto. And so earlier this year, the spring was actually not particularly hot in Kumamoto, but in mid-May, the rainy season started, and it was the earliest the rainy season has ever started in Kyushu. And it's about 2 weeks earlier than it would normally start. However, last week they announced that it's probably already ended, and given how hot the weather is now, it probably has ended. And if that's so, it's also the earliest it's ever ended in Kumamoto. And today it's 37. Usually we don't get temperatures in the mid to high 30s in this part of Japan until late in July or early August. But if you look at the weather forecast now, it's just every day from now on, it's going to be mid-30s. And the Japan Meteorological Agency has been saying that this is going to be an above normal hot summer, and that will continue until September. Remains to be seen if it's going to be like last year, where summer-like weather continued all the way into the beginning of November. So we went on vacation to Okinawa in the first weekend of November, and it was still close to 30 degrees there. So, good for beach weather, maybe not so good for things like cabbages. So one thing that's really been affecting people in Japan is the big rise in the price of food. And some of that has been the result of the very hot summers that have been happening in the past few years. So during the winter, the price of cabbage went up substantially, and that was a result of this really extended summer period. And basically, it was too hot for the cabbages to start to sprout. They usually plant them around September, and right now, the cabbages are fairly cheap because the spring was kind of cool. Another problem is the price of rice basically has doubled in Japan in the past year, and that the reasons for that is complicated. But one of the reasons this happened is that last year, because the rice quality was not so great because the temperatures were so hot. The amount of very high quality rice was limited. And for whatever reason, this caused a rise in the price of all rice. And, there's other factors that are involved with that, but climate change is part of that. I also always look at the weather back in where I grew up in Manitoba, and earlier this spring, in early May, in Manitoba, it got up to close to 40 degrees Celsius. And of course, that's getting close to the warmest it's ever been in that area. And for it to happen in early spring was not good news. And, it basically triggered a whole lot of forest fires. And some towns had to be evacuated. And that's also impacting the agriculture there, because there hasn't been enough rainfall to really help the crops out, considering how hot it is. So, climate change, it's really affecting how food is being grown and how people live. So these things are becoming very noticeable. And they're becoming noticeable in Canada, and they're becoming noticeable in Japan. And as I said earlier, I've been trying to make the students that I'm teaching aware that these things are happening, and as young adults, they are going to have to deal with these problems, and whether it's through mitigation or to get involved in politics to try and change policies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There's lots that these students will have to do. One fun thing that's happened in the past few months, I went to Mount Aso, and Mount Aso is a large volcano in the center of Kyushu. It takes about 2 hours to drive there from where I live. And I went up there with my colleague, and there was a visiting professor from Montana. He's more of a paleontologist, but of course he was interested in Mount Aso. We got up there, and it's the middle of the rainy season at that time, so there was definitely the risk that it would be raining heavily, and it did later in the day. But when we got to the top of Aso, where there's a crater where the volcano is, and at the bottom of the crater there's a lake that you can see, and the conditions were absolutely perfect for that. So we could see right down into the crater, and you can see the steam coming out, and you can see all the nice strata from various volcanic eruptions. The last time I went up there was in 2019, and at that time it had only been like 2 or 3 years since the previous big eruptions, and since the last time I was there, they'd fixed these so-called bomb shelters, which protect people from volcanic bombs, which are basically lava that freezes up as it's flying through the air, and it's sort of shaped like a football. And you can hide in these shelters if there's an eruption. And yeah, they had fixed those all up, so it was pretty nice up there. Also, there was we went to the Earthquake Museum to commemorate the 2016 Kumamoto earthquake. And this is located in Tokai University, which is sort of on the way to Mount Aso. And my colleague had actually worked at this university before the earthquake happened, and his office was in this building that's now part of the museum, because the main fault that ruptured goes right through the middle of this building. And as part of the museum, they've tried to preserve that building. And yeah, it's pretty shocking to see. They had a clock that showed the time when the largest earthquake happened, and it's pretty sobering. There was one student. There was a bridge that connects. There's basically this gorge there where the Shirakawa River flows through, and basically the fault goes through that gorge. And there was a large landslide that destroyed the bridge that connects Tokai Daigaku, or Tokai University, to the main highway. And yeah, unfortunately, there was a student who was on the bridge when that happened, and the damage to the university was obviously quite severe. So yeah, it was quite sobering to see the museum. And I experienced the earthquake as well, because I was here when it happened. But where I was, the damage was not so severe. The worst thing that happened at my apartment was that some things fell off the shelf. But for a lot of people, they lost their homes. And at Tokai University, it was very devastating. Many of the buildings were completely unusable after that. So seeing the building still intact, and you can see the chairs falling over, and there's glass on the ground. It's really, if you come to Kumamoto, you should definitely see it. It doesn't take so long, and it's kind of on the way to Aso. Another thing that I did was go to the Japan Geoscience Union conference. And one thing that happened after the conference is I broke my arm, and that's one of the reasons I have not been able to do the podcast. But at the end of May, I went to the conference, and it's always a great conference and always fun to see all my colleagues. And I gave a presentation on some ice sheet reconstruction work I've been doing for the Eurasian ice sheets, which hopefully will submit the paper this summer, but we'll see. And one of the highlights for me was to meet Tanghua Li, who's a glacial isostatic adjustment modeler in Singapore. And I've of course looked at a bunch of his papers, and it was fun to meet him. And he's working on a lot of interesting things, and it was nice that he came to the conference. And he was working on trying to figure out the sea level history along the coast of China. Another interesting talk was by Masanobu Yamamoto, and he does a lot of work on reconstructing past carbon dioxide, which I'll talk about in today's deep dive. And what he does is he's got sediment cores from the Bay of Bengal near India. And these sediment cores go back several million years, and they use the carbon isotopes from leaf wax to infer the carbon dioxide changes. And how that works is that there are two types of plants called C3 and C4 plants. I will talk about this as well later, but the thing is that these two types of plants have different abilities to grow in particular carbon dioxide environments. So basically, these types of plants will thrive. The C4 plants will thrive in a low carbon dioxide environment compared to a C3 plant. So by looking at the variations in the leaf wax carbon isotopes, they can figure out how much of these two different types of plants there are, and use that to reconstruct the carbon dioxide. And he showed that they've got reconstructions going back to 6 million years ago, and that's very exciting because his previous record only goes back to about 1.5 million years ago. So very exciting to see. For my own interest in ice sheets, ice sheet reconstruction specifically, there were two presentations, one by Karin Nemoto and another by Takuto Kasuya, and they were using sediment cores off the coast of Chile to infer the history of the Patagonian ice sheet. And they used a couple of different proxies. One interesting one is beryllium isotopes. So there are basically two isotopes of beryllium. One is produced cosmogenically. So basically it's produced when cosmic rays interact with matter on the surface of the Earth. And the other one is from geological sources. So based on the relative amount of these two isotopes, you can infer the size of the ice sheet. So basically, if you have a lot, I think how it goes is that if you have a lot of the isotope that's produced from the rock, that tells you that there's a lot of glacial erosion. Whereas if you have a lot of the cosmogenic isotope, then it's an indication that there's not so much influence from the ice sheets. So that record goes back at least 100,000 years. So there's been at least 3 growths of the Patagonian ice sheet in the past 100,000 years, I believe. Another exciting thing that happened was Canada's first all-Canadian Arctic scientific expedition, and that was led by my master supervisor, Thomas James, and there's a documentary on the CBC about that if you're interested. And because Canada didn't really have a specific boat for going to Antarctica, they actually had to use a boat from the Navy, which was a bit controversial, but as long as the purpose was purely scientific, they do allow military vessels to go to Antarctica. Otherwise, it's not really allowed because Antarctica is supposed to be a non-militarized place. And of course, Canada has interests in the Arctic, and they also want to assert some say in what goes on in the Antarctic. So as a result of that, they decided it would be a good idea to send a research vessel there. And I think it's already happened, but there's a big conference on the future of Antarctic policy, and Canada wants to be part of that. And by collecting scientific data and publishing it, they can assert that they are working on Antarctic research and should have a say in what happens in the Antarctic. And the purpose of their cruise is to find evidence of human impacts on Antarctica. So looking for things like microplastics. So all very interesting, and I look forward to what kind of results they have. And I got to talk to Tom about a week after this documentary came out, so it was interesting to hear about this expedition. Lastly, I talked about this in the last episode about how I was worried that there would be cuts at the NOAA and NASA, who store a lot of the paleoclimate data that I've been using. And so far, they've not shut down the data repository that I was working to back up. But there's been lots of different cuts to NOAA and NASA and other climate-adjacent research endeavors in the United States. And, last week they closed down the NOAA and NASA social media feeds for climate. They shut down climate.gov. They kicked the Goddard Institute of Space Science out of their building, and this building is at Columbia University. And if you've ever watched Seinfeld, it hosts the Tom's Restaurant. Really no reason why they needed to kick them out of the building, because they have the lease for another 5 years or so. They've been making lots of cuts on many things related to weather forecasting. The Arctic DEM, which is the topography map for the Arctic, that funding for that has also been cut off. And just this morning, they announced that this military satellite, which is used to forecast the intensification of hurricanes and to detect changes to sea ice, also got cut. And as of tomorrow, that data is not going to be made publicly available. And, I think back to my time in Canada. There were a lot of cuts in the 90s by the Canadian government to basic research in earth sciences. And Canada never truly recovered from those cuts, and I fear that will be the same for these cuts that are being made by the United States government. And make no mistake, the United States is the biggest funder for earth science research, and a lot of really big projects are only possible because of that funding. And on social media, I see commentary, other countries should pick up the slack, but that's simply not realistic, because these kind of projects, like sending up a satellite, take years to set up, and funding scientists to do these kind of projects is not cheap. And some countries might spend a bit of money to hire a few people from the United States, but the shortfall in funding is not going to come back, at least not quickly. And I say this as somebody who's been precariously employed for some time. It's not getting easier to do academic science. And in Japan, for instance, funding for academic science has kind of been frozen for the past 20 years or so. And because of inflation, that means that it's effectively shrunk quite a bit. And I think the Japanese government has said they will increase some funding, but the government's priorities are not necessarily going to be earth science focused. So, at the end of the day, you have to do what you have to do. So I've started teaching English, which absolutely wonderful, and I enjoy it, and there's no shame in that. And in my limited spare time, I can work on things like a podcast and my own research. And I think realistically, a lot of researchers, that's what they're going to have to do. If they want to continue their research, it might have to become like a hobby. And until the political climate around the world changes, I think that's what's going to happen. So, take heart. I'm still doing it. And I'm having a good time. And I do hope to work on this podcast a bit more, but I think at least while I'm doing teaching during the term, my time is quite limited. So, but yeah, it's fun to educate people, and I'm not sad about that in any way, and I do hope that everybody who is affected by the cuts to science lands on their feet. And I just want to say that we're all in this together, so we should all try to help each other out. So anyway, that's it for the intro.